よっしゃ今日も一日頑張るか
Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth is one of a handful of RPGs that headlined the early part of 2024, and it's also the much anticipated sequel to 2020's Yakuza Like a Dragon. Releasing for Xbox One, Series, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 and PC on the 25th of January, Infinite Wealth straddles the old and new generation of consoles and allows fans who joined the series with Ichiban's debut to play this without needing to splash out for an upgrade. It also arrived in time for the Chinese Zodiac's Year of the Dragon, which, if nothing else, is a fortunate coincidence for a game that features a dragon or two of its own. Returning at the forefront for this adventure is Yakuza Like a Dragon protagonist, Ichiban Kasuga, along with series veteran Kazuma Kiryu. Familiarity with the events in both Yakuza Like a Dragon and Like a Dragon Gaiden will be useful, but aren't necessary. The setting for this game, Hawaii, ensures that most characters begin new arcs here, and don't carry much baggage with them, both literal and figurative. This is still a Like a Dragon game though, so you can expect an element of surreal side activities mixed with a serious and twisting cinematic narrative that focuses on politics, corruption, and the abuse of power through the lens of the criminal underworld. The story begins in Yokohama, with a sequence that shows Ichiban helping a former Yakuza foot soldier reintegrate with the real world. This is a slow introduction, which sets the scene, but does seem to shoehorn in an awkward sequence where Ichiban's friends, Namba and Adachi, help him prepare for a date. I could make an argument that this is just designed to introduce these characters and their personalities to new players, but the entire premise of this section felt quite naive for a game whose target audience is very clearly over 18. I do think this might have been better placed into side content, but it's one of those things where the moment you arrive in Hawaii, you kind of forget about it for a while, so it wasn't that much of a blemish on the game. Ichiban's reason for an impromptu holiday is to track down a woman who may be his mother. This spirals out of control quite predictably, but the core premise is rooted in that sense of family, honour and determination that is common within this series. This tale about Ichiban's past interweaves with the latest arc of Daidoji drama, as Kiryu finds himself in Hawaii at the same time and ends up saving our current protagonist from a series of unfortunate events. Interestingly enough, the plot proceeds with Ichiban gathering party members until just before the game's halfway point, when the paths of each diverge. Kiryu heads back to Japan to deal with the Phoenix-like Seiryu clan, while Ichiban stays in Hawaii to deal with a secretive plot that is taking place. This split narrative sees allies new and old paired up with these former Yakuza, and allows for a fresh-feeling set of character interactions without needing to rewrite everyone's backstory. Overall, the plot is about a 60-hour slog, with 20 of those being devoted fully to side content, the biggest of which I'll go into later. Bringing Kiryu into this tale in such a prominent role was a smart decision, as his stoicism, which is now supplemented with a heavy dose of nostalgia and reflection, make him a smart contrast to the affable and emotional Kasuga. While the protagonists are already well established, what really makes this story work, for me at least, is that the main cast are adult. This isn't the same copy and paste RPG where a group of teenagers team up to fight the manifestation of an evil god. Rather, the true evil here is a very real and believable scheme, born out of both greed and necessity by prominent figures in society. Another thing propping this narrative up is that the game is well grounded in real-world politics, mentioning the aftermath of the COVID pandemic and its effects on the Japanese economy, along with a handful of present-day issues and political hot topics, such as power generation and waste disposal. These are well used to anchor the realism, and that really does help the game work. This main plot never feels overly contrived or forced down your throat as a result. What helps to break up this relatively heavy plot is the absurdity of the side content, and it feels like an underreaction to say that it's this dose of levity and insanity which sets the series apart from its contemporaries. All the usual minigames such as golf, poker, darts and karaoke return. What I begrudged the most about the previous Like a Dragon game, Gaiden, was that none of the side content felt worthy of being highlighted or placed into a significant spotlight. Nothing felt weighty enough that it impressed me. Infinite Wealth's big side activities feel like overcorrections in the best way possible. The first is a mode in which Kasuga helps the owners of the Dondoko Island Resort recover from a disastrous state. This portion of content is set up in a similar style to that found in the Animal Crossing games, and that comparison isn't completely without merit. This is very much designed to replicate the same vein of gameplay. It's worth noting that for a side activity, the amount of content in this mode is very impressive, and I personally like this more than the actual Animal Crossing games, as you have a more defined goal to work towards, in this case returning the island to its former glory. Along with a healthy dose of collecting fish and bugs, Ichiban's efforts are also put to fighting off a group of miscreants who continually dump waste on the island. You clean these up the only way he knows how to, smashing them with a baseball bat. You use the materials gained through this to build furniture for your own little shack, or to set up decorations on the island. In the truest form of Like a Dragon's over-the-top surrealism, you eventually use this same DIY bench to make literal buildings and cars, which can be placed around the island. This increases the appeal of the location and attracts more tourists to stay, as well as injecting another dose of the series' absurdly serious approach to insanity. These tourists start off by being a few low-ranking office workers and homeless people, who are happy to stay in a tent for a break from everyday life. Eventually you upgrade the island to be a more attractive for S-rank guests, which include the wealthy and weird who expect a more lavish experience. Ichiban is tasked with making their stay more enjoyable, and in turn you are given a special currency. This can be used to buy more decorations, or it can be converted to dollars to spend in the game proper. In essence, this is what I believe makes this side activity work so well. Yes, it's deep, well thought out, and for many people will feel like a good indie game in its own right. But the reason it succeeds is because it's not, metaphorically and mechanically speaking at least, on an island from the main game. Money is very important, as expected for a game called Infinite Wealth, and this activity provides a solid source of capital for your time investment. You can also return to the main game portion and find new guests to invite to the island, which in turn helps to improve your earning potential. Another key feature of Dondoko Island is the farm area, which links in with another one of the game's big activities, Sujimon training. If Dondoko Island takes more than a liberal dose of inspiration from one genre of games, then Sujimon does the same for another, dishing out some creature collecting goodness with a Like a Dragon twist. This side activity sees Ichiban collect and battle his foes to create a team of 6 Sujimon, so he can work his way up through the league and challenge the Sujimon Master. If you're new to this series, it might take a few minutes to get used to the fact that these aren't monsters that you're collecting, but the thugs and miscreants that you beat up on the street. Sujimon can be recruited through regular battles, where after a combat encounter an enemy may remain in the world and can be given a gift along with a show of affection. They might then join your team. Alternatively, you can encounter them at raids, which happen throughout the city, or you can use in-game cash or tickets and pull these Sujimon gacha style. Yeah, it's all a bit mental to be honest, right down to the fact that the gacha summoned Sujimon all seem to come in the type of attire I'd expect at a high security prisoner transfer or a secure psychiatric facility. Needless to say, around Hawaii you'll run into other trainers who want to battle their own Sujimon against yours for money, items and experience. As you do this, you increase your rank, and once it gets high enough, you can tackle the elite trainers, Jack, Queen, King, Ace and Joker. When you're not using them to battle, these very same Sujimon can be put to work on Dondoko Island's farm, to earn money, grow crops, gather crafting materials, or simply train themselves and level up. The game's 2 major side activities have a very symbiotic relationship, and this really helps elevate them both in my opinion. Yes, both are a little unorthodox, but if you invest time into either of these, you're also giving yourself some form of tangible progression in another aspect of the game. Speaking of progression, Ichiban and his party have levels and stats like a traditional RPG. These can be augmented by equipping gear, and each member has a head, chest and foot slot along with 2 accessories. Weapons are job specific, and each character has a unique job based on their character backstory or history, and a series of generic jobs that can be unlocked. For example, Tomizawa, the taxi driver Ichiban meets at the start of the game, his starting job is cabbie, and all his abilities revolve around a car theme, such as shocking enemies with a car battery or using a bucket of soapy water to wash down his foes. You can play the entire game using each character in only their unique starting job, but leveling up each subsequent job gives that character a permanent stat buff to all jobs, so you can grind up on these if you are so inclined. The equipment you use throughout the game can be bought, gained via side quests, found in the overworld, or dropped from enemies. You can also use a crafting and upgrade mechanic to improve or add properties to your weapon. This system isn't deep, but given the number of jobs and weapons in the game, it didn't need to be. It's functional and gives those min-maxers a way to really squeeze out every additional drop of damage. You can find upgrade materials out in the world, but more prominently, in the game's 2 dedicated grinding dungeons, which are basically abandoned buildings where you clear out the bad guys who've taken them over. You do have to go to both of these as part of the main narrative, but it's mostly an optional activity for those who want to grind for either gear or experience. As such, progression in the game is fairly well paced, but players who do more sub-stories and side content will naturally become more powerful. Even just performing the regular side activities, such as playing the can collecting minigame or a few rounds of baseball, will allow you to buff your stats by acquiring more powerful equipment or purchasing books that boost job rank. In theory, you could even do this to get your job rank grinding done all the way up to 99, but it would take some time and is likely not the most efficient route. Almost every action in the game contributes to Kasuga's personality or Kiryu's awakening, which in turn give passive buffs in combat. These also unlock certain actions in the overworld. A quick example of this would be the gentleman here, who won't join the guest list of Dondoko Island unless Kasuga reaches the daredevil level of his personality. These are usually found via interactions that take place in this game's world, which consists of 2 maps we've seen before, in Yokohama and Kamurocho, and the new Honolulu City map. These maps contain some instance areas, but are mostly open and you can explore on foot or using a new, more stylish mode of transport. The new Hawaii map is quite impressive to behold, however you explore it, and just walking on the beach and seeing all the casual animations playing out does give you a sense of scale at play here. It's this that helps me forgive some of the not so great character models, particularly for generic NPCs. Another thing that helps is that there's strong synergy with combat, as almost every other activity in the game either directly or indirectly increases the party's combat capability. Combat is a turn-based affair, building on the system in 2020's Yakuza Like a Dragon. You have regular attacks and skills along with consumable items, but what most of the combat feels set up for is knockbacks. When hitting enemies with attacks, they are flung in a specific direction, and are dealt damage based on what they hit. You can even kick them into your allies and get a bonus punch or kick in. When you combine this with the number of skills and abilities available, you do end up with some potent combinations. And the new jobs are a good variety for any sort of playstyle. Some of these return from the previous game and others are new for this one. Some of these are objectively better than others in combat, while others stand out in terms of the spectacle of battle. Infinite Wealth adds some impressive big finisher moves, which contain dramatic overblown sequences where your enemies lose chunks of health. Each character has their own big finisher too, with Kiryu's being particularly of note. His lets you break free from the restrictions of turn-based combat, and for a set duration, he dials back the clock and goes full Dragon of Dojima on his foes. This is a nice touch, because not everyone wanted the series to ditch its real-time action style of combat and go turn-based, even if I do fall on the side that prefers this new system. Technically speaking, the game ran well, and I experienced no crashes throughout my 75 hours with the game. There were certainly some moments early on where there were a few frame stutters that were noticeably out of place, but these disappeared quite early. I didn't run across too many bugs and was glad to see that the grammatical mistake in this game's demo, released alongside Like a Dragon Gaiden, was fixed for the full release here. The most noticeable issue I had while playing is one that would freeze the protagonists in place for a few seconds while waiting to perform an action. This only happened in the 2 leveling dungeons, but was more noticeable as it was really the only issue I did experience. Graphically, this game is in a transitional period between looking like an Xbox One game and an Xbox Series game, and it therefore looks fine. Some of the facial detail on the main cast, particularly during the big cinematic cutscenes, is very impressive, while a lot of the NPCs and quest givers are significant drop-offs from that. Like Gaiden, this game also contains the big 3 upscaling technologies, and correctly shows controller icons on screen while using a PS5 controller, which I do appreciate. Taking all the DLC out of consideration, the biggest issues I have with this game are mostly minor nitpicks, and it's just things that make the game feel a little older than it ought to. There's a lot of low barriers and walls that you look like you should be able to walk or jump over, but these end up being an invisible wall. The pickup items in the overworld are all just glowing balls of light or briefcases of some sort. There's also a very obvious transitional sequence when Ichiban moves from walking on land to swimming and then back again. These aren't massive issues, but they do date the game a little. I'm aware that adding fixes for these would be a time-consuming endeavour, and it's almost certainly not worth the effort, but it's still something that was very noticeable after I'd played for 70 hours. As I mentioned previously, this is a game that had a lot of content, and I certainly believe that the game is good value in its present state. But I also can't help but feeling that it comes to a screeching stop in a way that feels quite jarring. Once you've seen the credits roll, you get spat out into Premium Adventure, which is this game's version of keep playing the game, and unless you want to try and use level 50 enemies to grind ranks on each and every job, you are pretty much done with the game progression-wise. You can still play all of the minigames in this mode, but there's no piece of content that demands you level or power up, at least not in the way that Yakuza Like a Dragon's Millennium Tower dungeons did. This was a true endgame activity, and I had to level Ichiban and his team up to the level cap on multiple jobs to stand a chance. It was also designed in a way where the enemies were tougher and demanded that time investment. For the Western release of that game, the Millennium Tower wasn't a paid DLC, but for the Japanese version of the game it was paywalled off. That practice has gone global for this game, with the Big Swell dungeon, along with this game's New Game Plus mode, now locked behind an additional DLC cost, or an upfront cost for one of the game's special editions. What's particularly aggressive about this is that there's not even a basic and repetitive endgame activity, like harder floors of existing dungeons or a battle arena with tougher enemies. It was like the game was pumping the brakes on and telling me through its own gameplay that I was done here. Another thing likely to infuriate at least a handful of people is that there are achievements that require this DLC content too, and they were there on launch. So if you are a hunter, be prepared to pay out, or you can kiss the perfect game goodbye. Entirely objectively speaking, I can't say that what we've got already isn't worth the price, because it very much is and more. But all of this feels like it's presented in a way that was designed to annoy, particularly as you can't just buy either the Endgame Dungeon or New Game Plus separately. They are bundled together. In totality, I have to say that Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth is a very, very good game, and it's available on both current and last gen consoles. In return, all it asks is that you be willing to buy into some of its crazy, and that's a very reasonable trade-off for the hundreds of hours of entertainment this could potentially offer. In a more traditional sense, Infinite Wealth is held up by strong characters and a plot that is relevant to the modern age, and therefore is highly compelling. It uses its dual protagonist approach to good effect in bringing in fans old and new, and for all the little things that annoy me, there is always something just around the corner that is unexpected and extravagant enough to make up for it.